Hey, good morning. Yeah, it's Terry here, and I thought I would do Monday Mindset on video. I've never done it before, but I thought about doing it for a long time. And today I want to talk about something that's really been on my heart, especially with what we're going through right now as a country and how our country, communities, and even families are being divided, that friendships are falling by the wayside over so much of what's going on. And I know if you're like me, it's breaking your heart in so many different ways. And you cannot be alive and not have this impact you in some kind of way. But I learned something about myself, and I learned something about life as several years ago that I wanted to share with you, and it has to do with forgiveness. And my dad was an alcoholic, and because of that, he was incredibly abusive. And growing up in our home, it was a very, very scary place to live. There was physical abuse, verbal abuse, there was all kinds of abuse. I don't want to go into that, but every kind, and it was a scary place to live. We were actually in fear for our lives and our safety. And when I was 10, my dad decided to leave us. He abandoned our family. My mom worked as a waitress, raising 5 kids, double shifts, 7 days a week, just to make sure that we were fed and that we had a place to live. And I think of my mom as one of the heroes in my life. And it was interesting that during this time, as I reflect back, I think about her circumstances and what she had to go through. And never once did I hear her complain. Never once did I hear her talk bad about my dad, even though he had done all of these things. And so I think about her as being somebody that's strong and somebody that I respect and admire. And she was committed to raising us and making sure that we had what we needed to make it. And so, periodically after my dad left, he would drop into our lives for like a day or two at a time, just out of nowhere. And we might not see him or hear from him for a year or two, and then boom, he was there, and then he was gone. Well, when I graduated high school and then I went into college, my dad called me. He was living 80 miles from me at that time and asked me to come up and see him. It was Christmas season, and I was really excited. So I actually got a present for him. It was before Christmas, a few days. And so I got a present for him. And all the way up to his house, I was thinking about, the conversation that we would have. Like, hey, how have you been? And what have you done? And what are you thinking? And I wanted to get to know him. And when I got up there, I knocked on his door, and he opened it, and he said, "Follow me." He walked right out of the house, closed his door, and I got my car, and I followed him. We went to this house where there was just wild party going on. I mean, it was drugs. It was wild, and it was not anything that that it wasn't my scene. I didn't do this. I didn't go to these types of things, and I mean, I was so angry because I had this idea of just wanting to have a conversation and get to know him. I was so angry that I got in I walked out, my dad followed me, and I looked at him and I said, "I am so ashamed of you. I am more of a father to you than you've ever been to me, and I don't ever want to see you again until you're sober." And I remember I was so angry, and I got in my truck, and I was driving down I-5. I was, living in the state of Washington at the time, was driving down I-5 going home, and all of a sudden I had this thought. I had this thought about my dad. And I started thinking about his life growing up. And I knew a few things. And for whatever reason, I started thinking about him at this time. I knew that as a boy, his parents were alcoholics. I knew that his mother was very abusive and even tried to take his life on more than one occasion. And all of a sudden, I pictured my dad not as this mean, angry villain type person, but I pictured him as a little boy, scared, like me. That wanted protection like me, that wanted to feel safe like me. And for whatever reason, as I'm driving down the road, my heart broke, and I had compassion for him because I felt like I could relate to him growing up. And over the course of the next year, I learned a lot more about my dad and about his story. And it was tragic. And if you had heard his story, if I didn't know it was my dad, it would have been tragic. It would have broke my heart. And so I had a change of heart. And I was invited to go up to my dad's house the next year to do the same thing, and I did. And it was the same experience, except this time everybody was at his house. But although my dad hadn't changed in that year, I had changed. And I just sat there. And I sat there for a few hours. I didn't talk a lot to my dad or anybody else. But finally, I was able to give him his gift. And I said, Dad, I've got to go. And he followed me out to my truck. And he looked at me and he said, Son, are you ashamed of me? And I said, No, Dad. Because that's what I had said the year before. And I said, No, Dad. I said, I love you. And I'd never told him that in my life. I was 22 years old. I'd never told him that. But I felt like I needed to. I felt like I did. I felt like I'd learned something about him that broke my heart and allowed me to relate to him. Now, here's the deal. It didn't excuse what he had done. It didn't mean that didn't happen. But I understood him a little bit more. And I said, No, Dad, I'm not ashamed of you. I love you. And he looked at me and said, Son, I'm going to get help. And I said, I believe you. And we hugged, and I got in my truck, and I drove away. And it was probably about 4 or 5 months later that he called me, and he said, Son, I just want you to know that I'm getting help, and that I'm turning my life around, and I wanted you to know that. And I said, I was grateful. I said, thank you, Dad. And from that moment on, because I chose to forgive him. I chose to forgive him in that year between Christmases, that I was able to tell him I loved him. And again, it didn't excuse everything, but it changed me, and I was able to go to that circumstance and I was able to be different. And so, and that's the powerful thing with forgiveness. There's a couple of things I read in Psychology Today. Forgiveness is a decision to let go of resentment, bitterness, anger, and thoughts of revenge. That's what it is. We're making a decision because it destroys us. It destroys me. If I don't do this, it destroys me. And so it frees us up from the things that are controlling us, that are negative and driving us maybe into the same things or the same pattern. Forgiveness can lead to feelings of understanding, empathy, and compassion for the person that hurt you. And I experienced that. I did. And so I was grateful for that moment of clarity when I realized, and I thought about my dad, I thought about his story in his life. Studies have shown, again, this is from Psychology Today, that forgiveness can lead to healthier relationships, improved mental health, less anxiety, stress, anger, and resentment, lower blood pressure, fewer symptoms of depression, a stronger immune system, improved heart health, improved self-esteem. Man, that is powerful. And I think if there's anything that I needed at that time, and I continue to need, it's this. If I want to be healthy, then this is something that I have to do. This is a choice that I have to make. And so, real simply, there's a couple of things that we can do to forgive. And remember, forgiveness is a commitment to a personal process of change. So here they are. There's 6 things. Recognize the value of forgiveness and how it can improve your life. That's number 1. Number 2, identify who needs to be forgiven and what for. Number 3, consider joining a support group or seeing a counselor. Number 4, acknowledge your emotions about the harm done to you and how they affect your behavior and work to release them. Number 5, choose to forgive the person who's offended you. And number 6, move away from your role as a victim and release the control and power of the offending person and situation that may have had in your life. As we let go of grudges and we let go of bitterness and anger, you'll no longer define your life by how you've been hurt. And so there's a quote, and I don't know who said it. It's anonymous, and it simply says this: forgiveness is me giving up my right to hurt you for hurting me. That's what it is. This has been a long Monday mindset, but this has really been on my heart. I'm praying that we can, as a community, as a country, learn to forgive. It doesn't mean we ignore the past. It doesn't mean we excuse the past. It just means we acknowledge it and we move on. And we seek healing and we seek restoration. This is my hope and this is my prayer for America. And it begins with me. That's who it begins with. I don't wait for somebody else. I have the ability to make a decision for my benefit, for my wholeness, for my peace, for my future, that this is what I'm going to do. This is what I did, and I hope that this is what you'll do as well if you need to do this. Make it a great week.